candy shop.
I taste just like candy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ask for Candy, where a bunch of powerhouse men and women get together online to talk about love, sex, relationships, and what it takes to be amazing on the daily. Who I am Candace Harper, lovecoach.com. And tonight, I am coming to you from Metro Podcast Studios. I'm back, everybody. The buses were working this week. I got here safely. I'm here with my podcast husband, Avon, who's on the sound engineering. And as always, Jimmy is in New Hampshire. And so I'm very, very happy to be back on Metro Podcast. And I'm also broadcasting from my business page. So hi, Kenya, who just came. Hi, honey. So those of you who normally are on my Facebook page, let me see. I'm going to try to do a little bit of sharing right now. I'm going to share onto my, let me see, page you manage, onto your timeline. I'm going to share onto my timeline. And I'm going to say, tune in, peeps. So you guys on the Facebook can come in. You guys on Armed Radio, of course, I know that you're listening live, which is fantastic. Maybe you're driving in your car. Maybe you're just hanging out. I don't know how you listen to your podcast. But whatever it is, hopefully you're comfortable because we are going to do a serious deep dive today. And Kenya says, hi, honey. I'm also going to share to Ask for Candy, which is our group on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, I would definitely want you to join Ask for Candy. And if you're listening, but you're on Facebook, you go on Facebook sometimes, then I also want you to join Ask for Candy. And I want you guys to join Armed Radio Group News if you haven't done that yet, because there's a lot of really great podcasts. So it is fall, and our theme all season long is healing the mother-daughter relationship. And we've been talking to mothers, daughters, healers, experts, anyone who wants to contribute to this conversation of healing, right? And so important. I've recently been doing some research, and I'm going to talk about that in a little while. And just the importance of it is just, I'm more present to it than I've ever been. So last week I flew solo. I just did like a little check-in show. And this week I'm doing it again because I loved it so much. I was just telling Avon, this trying to find people for every single show is just a little tiresome. There's a lot of admin involved. Those of you who know me know that I'm not much of an admin person. I don't really care too much to have to do that. I did that a lot in my early career. I know how to do it, but I don't love doing it, making phone calls and doing paperwork, all that stuff. So I'm going to be flying solo a little bit for a while because also I want to be talking about my book. I want to be, really doing deep dive conversations with you guys and, being able to interact. And a lot of times when I have a guest, it just becomes sort of a conversation that you watch like television. And so I don't want you to have to do that anymore. I want us to be able to really be interactive with each other. And so I'm back flying solo, and the mother-daughter healing theme continues. And tonight I'm going to talk about my book, like I said. I'm close to completing one of my most important books right now, one of my most favorite. The title is I'm Not Mad, But She's Still Crazy, Getting Right with Mom for the Sake of My Love Life. And it's sometimes very lighthearted and sometimes a sometimes heartbreaking look at my own journey to self-acceptance through healing my history with my mom. And it's also a guide to healing and getting out from under the impact of having a dysfunctional or abusive mother-daughter relationship. You'd be surprised how many of us out there have them. And you'd be surprised how they can actually be healed. And it's amazing to me how many people think that there's no hope. And I get it, because sometimes, a lot of the research I've done, a lot of the questions that I've asked, and the women that I've talked to, some of the relationships the trauma is just out of this world. Some things you can't even imagine that they're happening until someone's telling you that that's what's happening to them. But, it's understandable that there's a lot of resentment and vitriol and hurt and trauma and pain and everything that comes from that. So this is a really deep conversation. It's much more common than I even thought it was before I started doing the research. And tonight I want to jump in and talk about some of the paradigms that I have built over these healing years to foster radical self-acceptance and create a fulfilling and happy life. Because that's another thing that I'm noticing in my research is that So many women who've had these dysfunctional relationships have resolved themselves to not having a complete and happy life and not being able to create a happy life because of the circumstances of having a dysfunctional relationship with their mother. And when I say dysfunctional relationship with their mother, I don't mean to minimize some of the abuse that goes on out there. But even with that said, a lot of the horrible abuses that go on out there, it's all healable. Doesn't mean that we're trying to turn it into a Norman Rockwell painting. It's just all possible to heal. We can all heal from our histories. But first, let's take care of business. Speaking of admin, you are maybe listening to Armed Radio on your TuneIn app with your smart device, or you're listening in the garden on armedradioglobal.com, or we're also on iHeartRadio. Our replays, you can catch us there. So don't forget to follow us and download your favorite shows. And those of you who like to stream, we're available on Spotify and Spreaker. Or maybe you're live here with me on the Facebook. So like I said, I've moved to my business page tonight. I was on my regular timeline. So I'm hoping people will start to gravitate over. It's a little different. I don't know if it notifies in the same way that it notifies on your business page, but hopefully, those of you who want to be here will get here. And also, like I said, don't forget to join Ask for Candy and Armed Radio Group News. You can comment or question here live on the Facebook throughout the show. Of course, as always, you're always welcome to interact with me. I love it. And I don't know if you guys, those of you who are on the Facebook who can see here in Metro Podcast Studios, they put up this fantastic poster of the shows that are available or that are taping here at Metro. And look, there's me. I'm right there on the poster, which is very exciting for me. I love being part of this whole Metro Podcast family. It's very cool. And also, don't forget that you can email me. If stuff comes up through the course of the show and I'm talking about stuff that you want to interact about, that you want to talk about, but maybe you don't want to do it publicly, or you just want to reach out to me or shout me out or whatever, you can email me at askforcandypodcast@gmail.com. And any questions that you put in there, I will answer on a later podcast, or I will talk about those topics, and I will not shout you out. I will not. You can remain anonymous if you like. Kenya says, okay, honey. So tonight, look, I'm wearing my little cap for everybody who normally watches, because the weather is getting chilly here in New York City, and the dome gets very cold. So I'm trying to not get a cold. I feel like I look a little bit like a homeless person, like a little hobo-ish. But you know what? I can't have the cold head. So I had to pull out my little old knit cap, my good luck knit cap. Anyway, back to business. So, like I said, I'm CandiceHarperLoveCoach.com. My talent is conversation, my passion is personal growth, and my purpose is to teach and inspire radical self-acceptance in myself and others so that we can all have our best possible love life. And that is why this is a conversation. We're not here to hand down a bunch of dating and relationship rules or rights and wrongs. We're not here to shame your love situation. Our only intention is to create audacious intimacy, seductive singlehoods, and healthy relationships. Kenya says, no, you look cute. Thank you, honey. I appreciate you. I'm trying. I got on a lot of knits and grays. Anyway, but when you live in New York, that's what you do. You got to be neutral and warm. Anyway, so tonight and every Monday night, that's what we're going to do, is have conversations that engage, educate, and or enlighten all of us in the areas of love, sex, relationships, and vibrating high. And tonight, you, the audience, are my special guests. So those of you who are listening on audio, normally on Armed Radio shows, you can call in. I don't do a call-in show anymore, because to tell you the truth, when I was letting people call in, it was always people who had no business calling in, like people who don't form their thoughts before they speak. And so they would call in, and that was all fun and everything like that, but it would always distract or detract from what we were trying to do, what the point of it was. And it didn't happen often enough that it mattered. Like if we were getting, 5 to 10 phone calls a show, then I think it would have been worth it, or even 3 phone calls a show. But we would get one intermittently every now and then. So instead of letting people call in, those of you who are just listening on the audio, you'll just have to email me or reach out later, find me on social media later. But those of you who are live on the Facebook, you know that you're my special guests. Kenya, you have been the star of my show many, many times. You always will be, because you've been supporting this podcast since the very, very beginning. Feel free if you have questions and you want to talk about stuff, you want to say anything about anything, feel free, mama, because you're one of my stars. And anybody else who comes in on the live, if you want to say something, you want to ask any questions, and even if you're watching later and it's not live and you ask questions or you make any comments, I will come back and respond and interact with you and all that good stuff. So, like I said, the title of my book, I'm Not Mad, but She's Still Crazy, Getting Right with Mom for the Sake of My Love Life. So let me just say right now, whether you're live or whether you're coming back and listening to this later, trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. If you have had a traumatic or dysfunctional relationship with your mother, there are going to be topics that I talk about in this show that might rub you the wrong way. It might totally hit those pain points. So just be prepared for that if that's what your history is. If not, and you feel like you'll be fine and you can talk about these things, great. But just know that this is a safe zone. It's always a safe space. So if I'm talking about it, I'm not here just like when we talk about relationships, I'm not here to shame whatever your relationship is, because that's the whole problem, is that, we live in shame, and that's why we end up in these abusive relationships. They start with shame. At some point, I always say that abusive mothers were abused daughters. So at some point they were shamed, and then they turn the shame into the next generation, and so on and so on. But what we're trying to do here is break cycles. And in order to break cycles, it means that we got to be able to talk about this stuff and talk about it in a way that is candid and open and healing and community oriented, in a safe space where there's no, you don't have to worry about anybody making you wrong for how you feel, because how you feel is not wrong. We don't deal in the conversation of right and wrong and morals when we have this conversation, because it's not helpful. For the most part, if we put aside toxic mental illnesses, and even if we don't put them aside, for the most part, what people do that causes trauma, they're doing from a perspective of thinking that what they're doing is going to work in some way, or they're surviving, or they think they're fixing something, or that their intentions are not usually to do this thing that they've done. So to be in a conversation of whether something's right or wrong and make it a moral issue is disempowering for the healing. Because if we're sitting in judgment of what other people did, while we sit in judgment, we prevent ourselves from being able to find the release of being imperfect and allowing ourselves to just be imperfect and human and makers of mistakes. Because there's always going to be somebody who thinks that something we didn't work for them, right? Okay, so with that said, I want to start talking a little bit about the research that I did for this book, because I think sometimes we'll talk on a subject, but we don't really talk about the depth of what its impact is, or what it really is, what the problem truly is deep down. So I put out a poll to a couple of groups that I purposely belong to, because their subject matter is around the mother-daughter relationship and the healing of the mother-daughter relationship. I'm not going to say what those groups are, because I want those people to remain anonymous, and unless you want to join the group, which you can reach out to me and we could figure that out, because you actually have that as an issue, then I don't want to just broadcast publicly what these groups are, because they're very private groups. But I was able to poll over 1,200 people. I got 1,200 responses from a couple polls that I did, because they're all part of the research of my book. And these are women who identify themselves as either abused daughters or children of narcissistic mothers. Same thing, but people like to word it differently. And here's the thing, my point here is not to villainize mothers, because I think, we've talked in previous shows about how we tend to put mothers on a pedestal and expect them to live up to a certain standard. And I think the opposite, but the same action is to villainize them. So this idea that mothers can't be human beings that make mistakes and are learning as they go, just like all of us, is, I think, detrimental to healing any kind of parental relationship. So this conversation is not to villainize anybody's mother, and it's not to support the idea that even an abusive mother is a villain. Trust me, with my own relationship with my mother, I spent many years in a story that I was dealing with a villain. And it wasn't until I released that story that I was able to have a different experience. So we'll talk more about that too. But in the conversation, a lot of villainization happens. So, I just want to make sure to lay down this foundation so that we're aware that that's not the intention. It's not, the intention is not to look at the abuse and point fingers of blame. The intention is to talk about it openly so that we can create a healing space of community and shared experiences and all of that good stuff. Because that's what heals. And so, and the pointing of fingers, that's what we do when we're not healed. When we're not healed, we have to say, oh, it's so-and-so's fault. If it wasn't for my mother, I would have this and I would be this and I would be that. And it's all her fault. She's the one who did it. It's her fault that, I'm not living the life that I want to be living. And so we want to transform that conversation. Not that it's not valid, but we want to transform that conversation so that we're not pointing the fingers of blame. And Kenya says that's a true and refreshing way to look at this topic. Thank you, my love. So hopefully you'll be involved and give us your input and things that you're thinking along the way. Because Kenya, you and I have talked about this, so I know that you have some things to say about this. And welcome, Candy, to the show. Candy, Candy, I bet you're here because the show is called Ask for Candy. We asked for you and you're here, so welcome, my love. Okay, so here's the thing too. I feel like when we talk about our trauma and we talk about what we've been through and, we're very plain about it and open about it, it leaves a safe space for other people who have dealt with what we deal with or what we've dealt with, right? And that's part of creating a healing community. It's part of creating healing, is to be able to say, it's like the Me Too movement. Right? You've been through this. Hey, me too. There's something about that me too that causes a sense of community and causes a sense of support. I've been through what you've been through. I can support you. So here's the question that I posed to the group. The question is, if you could give your mom a 100% guaranteed honesty truth serum and ask her any question, what would it be? So I had no idea of the can of worms that I was opening in this group. If you could give your mom a 100% guaranteed honesty truth serum and ask her any question, what would it be? Now, the reason I said a 100% guaranteed honesty truth serum is because a lot of times what children of narcissistic mothers deal with is the lies. And the lies are so insidious and they're just so manipulative and intertwined in the relationships, right? It's very typical for a narcissistic mother to just lie automatically, even when she doesn't need to, because part of the narcissistic personality disorder is needing to look good on the outside. So I need to look like I'm always right. I need to always be saving face. I need to always look like I know everything that there is to know. I need to look good on the outside. So when I'm that insecure, I will do anything to make sure that people are perceiving me in a positive light, even if it means lying about myself and other people. So that's why I said, if you could give your mom a 100% guaranteed honesty truth serum, because I know for a lot of these women, a lot of us that have been raised with a dysfunctional mother-daughter relationship, the lies are part of the most insidious, area of the abuse. And so what I had to do, because I got over 700 responses to just this question alone, but so many of the responses were very similar, which is amazing. I think it's like what I was talking about earlier, the healing of communities. It's like when we get to understand what we have in common with other people, our sameness with other people, it's just so healing in a community when someone else has been through what we've been through. But ultimately, what I want to do with the 10 answers, I compiled just the top 10 answers because they showed up the most, is actually break down the percentages. And that's what I'm going to add to the book. So if you buy my book, this is not to sell the book yet because I haven't finished it. So this is not like a pitch. But when you read the book, the title is I'm not mad, but she's still crazy, getting right with mom for the sake of my love life. What I'm gonna do is set up, what is the state of things right now as far as the mother-daughter relationship and just the dysfunctional relationships in that realm. And I'm gonna break like these answers down. I'm gonna break them down and put percentages on them. I haven't done the math yet, but one of the largest percentages of answers to the question of if you could give your mom a 100% guaranteed honesty truth serum and ask her any question, what would it be? Was, why did you have me? And there's different versions of that. So why did you have me? Why did you have kids? Why didn't you have an abortion? I mean, that's huge, right? So if I'm in a space where the question that I would ask my mother is, why did you have me? That means that I'm in a place of just questioning why I even exist. Like I feel like whatever trauma I'm suffering has me, I'd be better off if I didn't exist, right? And if you've ever dealt with depression or anxiety, if you've ever dealt with mental health issues, if you've ever just struggled with just being sad or rejected, you might have skimmed that feeling. You might have somewhat, experienced it on some level a little bit. But to be in a space of, wondering why your mother even had you, as if you would rather not exist and rather not be on this earth, is a serious impact of trauma, right? I mean, think about all of the things that it would then affect. If I'm walking through my life wondering why my mother had me and feeling like it's wrong, it means I'm saying that I'm wrong. Why did you do this thing? Why did you have me when it's not what you wanted and you treat me badly? And Kenya says that would be one of my questions. I hear that, Kenya, because I've had that question in my life before too. I have to say that wasn't the one that resonated with me the most. But what we want to think about with that is that if I'm a woman and I become a mother, and my thought process is, I was a mistake. She should have never had me. I shouldn't be on this earth. It's going to impact how I mother my children. It's going to impact how I am in relationships with other people, how I am in my love relationships. It's going to impact how I pursue my purpose here on earth, if I do at all, what I think of myself, my health in the long run, whether I have high levels of stress or not, how I approach friendships. It's going to affect every single thing in my life if I have a paradigm of I'm a mistake because my mother shouldn't have had me. And Kenya says, I actually asked her once and she got angry and said something horrible back. That's interesting, Kenya. I mean, if you want to share it, please feel free. I'm not going to ask you to share it in a public forum because it's totally up to you if you want to share what she said. But it doesn't surprise me because a lot of times with narcissistic or abusive mothers, the last thing they ever want is to be confronted or to be faced with who they've been and how they've been. Because, and I'm going to talk about this later, the perception is that I'm doing everything I can and everything I know to do, and that means that I have to be right. I must be right because I'm doing everything I know to do, and I can't accept any wrongness. Now we could do a whole show about when I can't accept any wrongness, it's because at some point in my history, I was shamed so badly and there was such consequences around it that to be wrong to me is death. And I know that was true with my mother-daughter relationship. My mother, to be wrong for my mother, she equates that with something horrible. And whatever that may be, it makes it that she never wants to be wrong. And think about that. If you never want to be wrong about something, you never want to be called on your shit, you never want to be questioned, and you don't want to look at yourself in that way, think about the impact that would have on your relationship with your child. If you can't ever say, you know what, mommy didn't make the right choice. Mommy didn't do the right thing, or, maybe I didn't want to have you when I got pregnant, but, I've grown to love you and I'm happy that I did. Can't tell you the truth because then I'd have to admit that there's something that I did that wasn't right. See, that's why we don't make it a moral conversation, because that moral conversation is what puts us in this position of, am I right or wrong? Am I right or wrong? Okay, so Kenya says you'll tell me later. Of course, honey, absolutely. I don't want you telling anything that, you don't want to tell in public. So then the next the most common answer from the question of if you could give your mom 100% guaranteed honesty truth serum and ask her any question, what would it be, is why didn't you protect me from mainly sexual abuse. Most of the answers were sexual abuse, but they were also, beatings from my siblings or, just a lot of negative, dangerous things. A lot of women who have dysfunctional relationships with their mother are angry at having been abandoned in that way. So if your mother didn't protect you from someone else's bad treatment, whether sexual, physical, mental, or whatever, as a child growing up, it makes the world very unsafe. And it also can really rev up that resentment. And it makes it very challenging as an adult to want to get into a space of being able to forgive and understand your mother's point of view, because the whole job of the parent is to protect the child, right? Like that's what is the structure as the parent. Even animals, they know to do that. And this is not to either villainize or to defend mothers, but because we know that they are also human when they're in their own sickness. Being able to understand and perceive their job in a way that works for their child sometimes can be a real challenge if it's not something that they can't do at all. And if I'm in a narcissistic personality disorder, then it's really like I'm not empathetic. I don't see that as a child the things that you tell me are true, that your feelings are valid. And a lot of women who are mothers who have NPD, it's because someone at some point said your feelings aren't valid, or used them sexually, or applied a lot of shame. I say all of this to say, and I know it's a slippery slope, because I know those of us who are still in the pain and feeling the pain and the pressure of having been through an abusive relationship don't really want to hear about what my mother's been through or why she's like what she's like. But if we're not willing to hear that, if we're not willing to be open to that, then we're not willing to go into the conversation of how can I take responsibility for my experience so that I can then make it different. So that's where the challenge comes in. So that was the next most given answer out of all of the answers. Then the third most given one was, are my siblings from the same father? This seems to be a common thing where, and this is not to judge anyone who has multiple children from multiple fathers or multiple mothers or whatever. This is not a judgment on that. But the question of, we don't know the truth. Like who's parent? Is this really my father? Is this really your father? Are we 100% siblings? So a lot of times when you're dealing with narcissistic parents, specifically narcissistic mothers, you won't always get the truth about your own paternity. And that ends up being something that's very important in our lives because it's part of where we came from. It's part of our health history. Being able to find here's the thing, if you don't know your paternity and you're not sure about biological parents, it's not like you can't live a happy, healthy, fulfilling life, but there's an impact when we have a narcissistic or abusive mother who doesn't tell the truth about those sorts of things. So, that seems to be a very common thing, when we're talking about abuse between mother-daughter abuse. Another one of the answers was, do you or have you ever actually loved me? Why don't you love me? Why do you hate me? I sort of lumped those all together. So that was the fourth most common answer that I got, this question of whether you love me. I really struggle with this one myself because I think a lot of times, especially with a narcissistic mother, you can have a narcissistic mother who can actually say, I love you, and say a lot, but then also use it in a manipulative way. And so it puts you in a space of, first of all, I don't know what love really is, because does loving me mean manipulating and controlling me, or does loving me mean, telling me things just to, I don't know, in one moment telling me good things and in another moment telling me negative things. It's really hard to define what love is. And as an adult, you don't ever want to believe that your mother didn't love you. That's one of the hardest things. And when you have that belief, it can be really disempowering, right? feeling like your mother didn't love you. So I think, yeah, it's just, here's the thing about it. What it ultimately comes down to is understanding that part of your rite of passage as an adult is knowing that the most important love you'll ever have is the love of yourself. And when your parents didn't necessarily freely give you love or give you love in a way that was healthy and nurturing and teaching for you, then you are in a position where you have to learn it for yourself and you have to grow it and nurture it for yourself. If you want to break that cycle of abuse and break that cycle of narcissism and negativity, the self-love component is it's important for everybody, but for you in particular, if you're questioning whether your parent loved you, it's extremely important, because ultimately it comes down to this need for approval, and it's the need for approval that has a lot of us stopped in our lives. And whether we had an abusive parent or not, that need for approval is crippling. It's crippling. So what you want to do is get out of the story of, if my mother didn't love me, or if I don't feel love from my mother, or the way I perceive my relationship with my mother says she did not love me or does not love me, what do I need to do? I need to find that love for myself. I need to create that love for myself, and I need to figure out what that is. And there's steps to do it. It's part of why I do what I do and why I coach. You can learn radical self-acceptance. That's why I do it. That's why I do this. So then the next most common answer, and I gotta tell you guys, it was like doing this research, even reading through the answers as I was, in the group and kind of seeing what the research looked like. It drains you. It's like emotionally, and I don't mean this as a complaint, because I do this because I love it and it makes me feel purposeful. The reason I am in this conversation and deal with this stuff is because it is what I'm here on this earth to do. And I live for it, and I love it, and I revel in it. And not in a, oh, it's so great that you're hurt kind of way, because I don't enjoy that part of it. But, just in reading what the state of things is, it can be very emotionally draining, and it can be very hard to look at. And so even in just reading these 10, most common answers, it makes me think of all the women who answered all of these questions and the things that they said and the states that they were in when they said them. And I have to say, it does something to me emotionally, where it's like I almost have to do a little bit of self-care afterwards. I almost have to get back into my own healing space, calm it all down again, because a lot of it really does truly resonate with my own past history. And I'm glad that it's a healed past history. But trust me when I tell you that our healing journey is a lifelong journey. It doesn't end. Once you stop healing, you stop growing, you might as well lay down in your coffin and die. This healing journey is meant to be lifelong, and there's nothing wrong with that. So then the next most common answer was, why was your fiance, man, or boyfriend more important than me? So we find that that's really common in abusive mother-daughter relationships and narcissistic mother relationships, is that there's men, husbands, stepdads, partners, anybody else who they put above their children in some way, whether it's that, that person is abusing their children in some way and they let it go, or they neglect their children for the sake of that person, or whatever. You guys have heard this story before, but I was surprised at how absolutely common it really, really is, with this little microcosm of women that I interviewed. And here's the thing about that. It'd be so easy to go into a story of judgment and right and wrong. But if you're someone who has narcissistic personality disorder and you're someone who doesn't know their worth as a human being, it stands to reason that what you think is the right thing to do is to be in survival mode and be manipulating people to, whether it's to give you money, give you stability, give you certainty, if you're trying to fit into some traditional mold and be a married woman as opposed to a single woman, even if you have kids, like all of those things stand to reason if you're somebody who doesn't love themselves and is insecure and unstable. And also, you have to think about the fact that we go back to our mothers, we're going back generations. So the standards about being a single woman are different It's not like today where you can be a single woman and do your thing and be happy. Women married men because they needed, men to survive, to pay the bills or whatever. If you go back a couple generations, not too far. And so, it was a lot of times it was a different world when our mothers were young. And some of you out there, a lot of the women who answered this poll, they're probably the age that I'm probably the same age as their mothers. And even when I was young, there was conversation. I'm Generation X. There was a lot of old world tradition, sort of pressed upon us. I mean, I had sisters, and it was sort of an unwritten thing that we were going to one day marry somebody who took care of the money and the finances and the stability, and that's, what we were groomed for, right? Even though my mom wanted us to go to school and everything, ultimately, get married and have somebody take care of you was kind of the message. And that's just Generation X. So you think about going back another generation and another generation and another generation. There was a time when women felt like they had to have a man or had to have a partner, had to have somebody to help them survive. That's not to make excuses, but when you come from that sort of, pathology, that kind of psychology about your own survival, it stands to reason that an insecure woman would be in a position where she thinks she has to put a stepdad or, a boyfriend or somebody who, comes in and pays a bill higher. And never mind if there's any sort of drug or alcohol addiction, because that's on a whole nother level with the codependency and all of that stuff. I say all of this to say, with a lot of these answers, and this is going to sound so crazy, but the hardest part about being the child of an abusive mother or father even is understanding that their behavior is not personal. That sounds crazy, right? Because as a child, there's no way you can rationalize that what's happening to you is not about you. But as an adult, in order to heal and be a healthy adult, it's about getting to a point where you get that what happened to you and what may still be happening to you is not about you. It's 100% about them and their hardships and their stories and their beliefs and their perceptions, which is why it's so important that we heal our own so that we don't turn around and do the exact same thing. So here's another one of the most common answers that I got. Why were drugs, alcohol, and etc. more important than me? So I touched on the addiction thing a little bit earlier, talking about with the man, boyfriend, fiance thing, which that can also sometimes be an addiction. Drug and alcohol addiction and abuse is, it's hand in hand, right? I'm not saying that every alcoholic or drug addict has abused, but the statistics are pretty high for abusers, being alcoholics or drug addicted. And so that goes back to what I was saying even stronger. When I have an addiction is exactly, like, I love whatever I'm addicted to more than anything. I don't know if you guys ever watched that show, Hoarders. I watch that show sometimes just because I'm fascinated by, and hoarding is an addiction, right? And so their adult children can be standing around them, begging, crying, pleading for them to live safer, to, throw out all the garbage, to not be living in a house full of, mice and cats and, rats and whatever. They can be crying and screaming and begging and doing everything they can to try to help clean up a house. But if you ever notice, if you watch those shows, the hoarder, if the hoarder even is willing to admit that they're a hoarder, because even that, like they say, the first step is admitting it. But when someone is in an addiction, when they're addicted to something, it is more important than the people in their life. And so, and it's the sickness. I mean, that's the illness. That's what it is. It's like there's no way around that. And so, that goes back to how do we find a way to not take it on as if it was about us? Because when someone is steeped in their addiction and they're making choices based on getting whatever their fix might be, it's just 100% about what it is that they think that they need and their own lack of enoughness and trying to fill themselves up, right? So even when it's your parent, It's like, how do I find that space for myself where I understand that my parents' addiction, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever, they put it before me and made it more important than me, yes, because they're sick. They don't know the difference. They don't know how to not do that. And that comes from their own pathology. And by choosing to be victimized by it, and I'm not saying that to invalidate anybody's feelings, but by making the choice to make it that it was about me and my lack of worthiness, then I also am putting myself in that same kind of mindset and setting myself up for addiction myself. Because that's all it is. It's a lack of worthiness. Thinking something outside of you is going to fill you up. We could do entire shows on basically all of these answers. And I don't mean to fire hose you guys with this stuff. I mean, I'm good for that because I can really, talk about it. But with most of these answers, we could really do an entire show on all of it. So another more common one, and I'm only going to give you a couple more of the common ones because I want to give you my 5 paradigms, my 5 ways of thinking that are healing ways of thinking. And here's the thing about ways of thinking. It's just like a yoga practice. Once we start practicing a new thought, even if we just take it baby steps a little bit at a time, the more you practice it, the more it becomes a belief. I think it's Abraham Hicks who says a belief is just a thought you keep on thinking. So when we have a lot of beliefs that don't work and a lot of beliefs that hold us back, the willingness to practice new beliefs and let them sort of take up the space that the old beliefs take up is what helps us sort of transform and have a different experience, right? So here's one of the more common answers. What happened to you when you were young? Which I love this answer as a question that I would ask if you could give your mom a 100% guaranteed honesty truth serum and ask her any question, what would it be? What happened to you when you were young? There was a lot of women that answered that. And the thing I love about that question is what it shows is that there is an ounce of empathy in there. Because one thing that repeats and that there's a lot of, and understandably so, and even myself, I was in a space of just resentment and vitriol and just hatred and anger about the way that I grew up and anger about the things that I experienced with my mother. And I have to admit it, at some point, hating my mother, hating her, and thinking that was what was going to save me from what I felt was wrong, right? So never wanting to let go of that resentment. But just the willingness to ask, what happened to you when you were young? How did you get this way? How are you this abusive? How are you this manipulative? What has you in this disorder? That willingness to ask that question as the child shows that there is an empathy there. And empathy is a good sign because it means that you're not just falling into the trap, the cycle of being another narcissist. Right? A lot of times we feel like if we're, nursing that hurt and holding on to that hurt and, just a fuck you attitude about the parents that abused us, we think that what we're doing is saving ourselves. It's well-intended. It's so well-intended. But what we're really doing is turning into someone who lacks empathy and someone who, because if you can't have empathy for your own parents, who can you really have empathy for? And even if you have your own children, it's going to show up because you can say, oh, I'm so much better with my kids because I'm so much more understanding. I really, take the time to help them out. And I'm not saying that, you're lying when you say that, but if empathy is not something that you're practicing and if empathy is not there for you and you can't find that empathy on any level, and by empathy, I don't mean let people cross your boundaries, but just an understanding that this person's behavior is about them, not about me. Without that empathy, it makes it almost impossible to develop healthy relationships with anybody else, right? And you can't hold empathy back from one person and think that you'll be able to put it onto another person or give it to another. We think we can. We think that it's something that we're very masterful at sometimes. But really, empathy is it's a universal feeling. It's a universal thing. Either I'm empathetic or I'm not. It's like being partially pregnant. You can't be partially pregnant. Either you are or you're not, right? Same thing with empathy. So, yeah, those are a lot of the most common answers that I got. And, a couple of them didn't surprise me so much. A couple of them did resonate with my own experiences and why I became a coach, why I decided to train in this field and actually help and support other people. I got it with a lot of them. And some of them just shocked the shit out of me. Like one, it was the only one that was this specific, but I just wrote it down. The answer was, the question that they'd want to ask their mother is, what part did you play in my father's murder? And how do you know the details of how it happened? So there's shit going on out there that any one person, but even though out of this poll, she was the only one who wrote this question, I'm sure there's others out there who have something similar. And all of that is the impact of unhealed shit, right? So that's why we want to stop the cycle. Now, here are the 5 paradigms that I'm gonna, we're already at 48, so I'm gonna have to go through these pretty quickly. But, what I really want mothers and daughters, because like I said, abusive mothers are just abused daughters. What I really want mothers and daughters from toxic relationships to understand after reading my book are these 5 paradigms. So the first paradigm, your feelings are 100% valid. Your feelings, your emotions, they are 100% valid. They just aren't the facts. So a lot of times we confuse our emotions and the way we feel with what is factual. When in fact, the way we feel is all our perception of things. So someone can say something to us, and the way we perceive it is one thing, and the way they meant it is something else. And when we're in communication breakdown with someone, especially over a long period of time, once we believe that what they're saying was what we believe it to be, that's what our brain is going to look for evidence of year after year. So if I think that you're trying to insult me, there's not going to be anything you say that I don't hear you trying to insult me, because that's what my mind has made up. And so my emotions are going to fall in line with, you're trying to insult me. You're trying to insult me. That feels hurtful. That feels hurtful because you're saying I'm unworthy. I already feel unworthy, and you're triggering my unworthiness, and you're making me feel bad. So that whole story is all around not understanding that your feelings are not the facts. They're just a product of your perception, and perception is almost always off for all of us. Thank you, Avon. We got 10 minutes. This goes so fast. So, and a lot of the women in the research would angrily and rightfully respond to the question with vitriolic feelings and accusations from having been abused and having been gaslit. And I'm not saying that any of that stuff is invalid, that what they're feeling about it isn't, it's 100% valid, but the willingness to say, okay, is what I think the facts, the way I perceive this, is it fact? No, perception is not fact. So that's the beginning of healing. That's not to take away from your feelings or make you feel unworthy. That's to let you know that you have power over what you can experience. Number 2, our abusers are not our healers. So for those of us who are sitting around waiting for an apology and saying, this is not going to be okay until she apologizes, stop torturing yourself with that. Because, I had many apologies from my mom when we were in our most dysfunctional places. Many apologies in her style of apology, which was, I'm sorry if you think da-da-da-da-da. I'm sorry after everything I did for you that you can't see, la-la-la-la-la. The apology, even if they can apologize to you in a way that is genuine, unless you're willing to heal yourself, because we can only be healers for ourselves. And what's unfortunate is that an abusive parent doesn't teach us how to do that. And that is part of what parenting is meant to be, is to teach you how to grow yourself, right? So your parent shows you how to live and models that for you, and the idea is that you get to be an adult at some point and you know how to then nurture yourself. We do have to take over that role, and when we have an abusive parent, they're not teaching us that, and that's the hardest part of it. But they can't do anything about it. That's the problem. And it's, even if they mend their own sickness, there's nothing that they can say or do that's going to override how we see ourselves and how we have agreed to the story that I'm unworthy of love, that I'm unworthy. And, this is not to take away from it. It's understandable why we would agree to it after years of getting abused, but it's not workable for healing, right? So because our perception is not facts, we have the ability to change our perception and to change the story into something that works for us. And I know that that's it's hard to fathom that, but that's why we do coaching, and that's why we actually do deep dives about it. This is just to introduce you to some different concepts than you might have, been dealing with or heard about before. The third one that I want to introduce you guys to is when we have, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, a lack of empathy for our mothers is just a continuation of the cycle. Right? So one of the things that really was very common in my polls, and it's very common in this group that I belong to, and a couple of the groups that I belong to, is the anger and the vitriol and the hatred and the words that are said. And this is not a right or wrong conversation, because it's not about, oh, you shouldn't say that about your mother. It's not a shaming thing. But what we fail to see when we're in a space of resentment and we're calling names and we're talking about how hateful and horrible this person is that in doing that, we are coming from a place of judgment and criticism and no empathy, no understanding of why this person would be so horrible. Now, I understand why we're coming from that place, but it's an unworkable place to come from. It doesn't save us, it doesn't help us, it doesn't serve us, it doesn't fix the relationship, definitely doesn't help us with our own children. So, empathy is one thing that we really want to get in touch with, because it's the lack of empathy that turns us into the narcissist, which I mentioned before. Number 4, it's important to remember you're not being punished, especially those, if anyone has ever dealt with religious abuse. Parents who are very religious and abusive, the danger in that is that God is somehow punishing you for what you do wrong. It's the moral conversation, the manipulative conversation, and anything that goes wrong in your life is a punishment from God. So having an abusive parent is not a punishment from God. It's not God saying you were unworthy of not having an abusive parent. It's the conditions with which you came into the world. And so for some people, they are born into the world without arms. For some people, they're born into the world with disease. Some people are born into the world with different learning abilities. Some people are born into the world with abusive parents. Some people are born into the world with different sexual orientations. Some people are born into the world feeling that they're in the wrong gender. So we all, as human beings, have a cross to bear, and some of us have multiple crosses to bear. And these are not punishments for not being worthy or not being enough. They are the challenges that life sets forth, because it's the journey that we're here to go on. It's what we're here to do. And how we choose to use it, the way I chose to use what I was born with, I chose to use it to support other people in going on their journey. I went on my own journey around it, whether the journey of healing, the journey of learning, the journey of getting to know who I was. And I chose to use it to say, okay, I can help other people get through their journey. I can help other people create healthy and fulfilling lives, even though they might have come from a very dysfunctional or painful history. And I'm not saying that from some pedestal on high. I'm saying that it is up to us in life to take this journey in a way that we use what's given to us and we turn it into something that is workable and usable. And number 5, there's nothing wrong here. So the biggest problem with all of it is that there's this unspoken misconception that we are all owed some perfect picture existence, that it was supposed to have been a Norman Rockwell painting, and because it didn't turn out whatever this random standard of perfection, normal, whatever. What the fuck is normal? Can anybody tell me what? Avon, do you know what normal is? Avon's nodding his head no. What the fuck is normal? There's no such thing. Perfect. Some high standard that we think that is supposed to be met. We think our parents are supposed to have met them. We think that we're supposed to have lived some certain way. I think television maybe is what fucked us up. I don't know. Watching all the 50 sitcoms or, whatever. There is no such thing as perfect and normal. There is no standard to meet. It's really about, being on this life's journey and understanding that self-acceptance and purposefulness are what are gonna fulfill you as a human. And the reason that you have the challenges you have is because they're steering you to what your purpose is, and they're steering you to how you can accept yourself and how you can help other people with it. You can't help other people while you're still living in the issue or living in the problem. That's why my job is to help guide people out of the problem, because there's so many, these amazing, amazing women who share themselves in this group. So many of you who have such a light and have so much to give the earth and so much to give the world. And my Kenya who comes in, I hope you're still listening, Kenya, like just amazing women who have so much to give the world. And as long as you're distracted by this pain and living in that story, it's holding you back. But you can use it. You can use it to challenge you to be as amazing as you can be. And that's why I coach what I coach. Anyway, that's it. Like, we're down to like maybe 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute with Armed Radio. But I want to tell you guys about a few things. So the title of the book, I'm Not Mad, But She's Still Crazy, Getting Right with Mom for the Sake of My Love Life. I'm going to keep you guys posted as to when it's coming out, when I release it, when I complete it. Also, my Epic Intensive. I want you guys to get on board with the Epic Intensive. So hopefully you're watching this on my business page. And if you are, after we wrap, I want you to click the link and go and fill out the Calendly form so you can get on my calendar for a complimentary consultation. We can talk about the Epic Intensive, and then what was the last thing I wanted to tell you guys about? And that's it. So if you want to get out of this like abused daughter, Armed Radio, we got 1 minute with Armed Radio. So I want to tell Armed Radio people, never forget you're a love machine. If you ever start to feel like you're not getting enough, just make more and ask for candy. Also, Armed Radio people, don't forget to find me on Facebook. So yeah, with the Epic Intensive, if you're an abused daughter, raised by an abused daughter, click that link. Bye, Armed Radio. Click that link and fill out the Epic Intensive form. Also, I want you guys to follow me at Ask for Candy. I just did this Instagram account like a few weeks ago. I'm really trying to build it. Or at Candy Love Coach, or at both. You can follow me on Instagram. And I think that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Also, I'm going to update the YouTube channel. I need to get on that. I've been way behind, lagging behind on it. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me fire hose you for this lovely Monday evening. I want to say thank you to my Avon and Metro Podcast Studios for always being awesome, being an awesome place to be. Check out me on the poster. Yay, I'm on the poster. I love it. Anyway, I love you guys so much. Thank you for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.